right, so we are moving on to solving systems by, oops, that's not a very good color for that, substitution. Okay, so remember that a system is two or more equations or lines. Okay, don't forget that piece of information. Hint, hint, very likely could be on a test. So we're going to figure out what it means to do it, to solve them by substitution. So this is way number 2. We've learned how to do graphing. That was number 1. Substitution is number 2. So substitution, the word substitution, is when you replace one thing with another thing, right? When I get a substitute or a sub for my class, I'm replacing myself with another person, right? So substitution, when you replace one thing with another thing, which means we are going to be replacing one variable with something else, okay? Kind of depends on what you're given. So substitution is, so at the end of this chapter, you're going to get to decide which one to use, okay? So substitution is ideal if you already have something solved for one variable. Let's do some examples so we can see what all this means. But first, write down your steps. First, solve for a variable in one of the two equations. So one of them you want to solve, either get y equals or get x equals, okay? Whichever one's easier to solve, which we'll talk about actually tomorrow or in the next video. Okay, so that's step number 1. Step number 2 is you're going to substitute whatever y equals in for y in the other equation. Okay, this is going to make a whole lot more sense when we have examples, but write the steps down anyway. Okay, and then step 3 is really important because students tend to forget it. Okay, once you have that y equals 3 or whatever, you then have to put that back in to get x, because remember our answer is an ordered pair, okay? Write down these steps. Let's do some examples. So, remember that one of your two equations, sorry, that's a cursor. One of your two equations needs to be solved for a variable. And look at that. Today, one of your equations will be solved for a variable for you, okay? So we already know what y equals. Y equals negative x plus 4. So in the other equation, instead of the y, we can substitute negative x plus 4, which means we would have 2x plus 3 times, always put what you're substituting into parentheses. Okay, so instead of the y, don't put a y, instead of the y, we're going to substitute negative x plus 4 equals 4. And again, that's a cursor in the picture I took or something, so it just equals 4. That's not 41. Okay, so again, we know what y equals, so we're going to substitute it in for y in the other equation. So in the other equation, you're not going to have a y. Instead, you're going to have what y equals. And then you need to solve. So chances are good that you're going to end up having to distribute first. So we've got 2x plus 3 times negative x would be negative 3x. So 2x minus 3x. 3 times 4 would be 12. Equals 4. Okay. Then you're probably going to have to combine some like terms. Okay, in this case it's 2x minus 3x, so that is negative x or negative 1x. Go ahead and leave the 1 there, I don't care. Plus 12 equals 4. Subtract the 12. I'm moving over here. We get negative 1x equals negative 8. Divide by negative 1, and x equals positive 8. Now, remember when I said be careful, because you're going to get to this point and you're not done, because remember your answer is always an ordered pair, so you need to figure out what y is now. So that means we have to, now that we know what x equals, we need to take and put what x equals into one of our equations for x. It's almost always easier to put it in the one that's already solved because it's usually solved for it should be solved for the other variable. So we would do y equals negative, because that's part of the equation, 8, because that's our x, plus 4, and then do the math. So y equals negative 4. So our answer is 8, negative 4. Yes, that is a lot of work that you absolutely must show me on your homework. Okay, so that's the answer, but all that work, including the stuff I just erased, that you're going to go back and write down if you didn't already, that is what you need to have in your notes. Okay? So, go back to the beginning. One of our equations is already solved for y. Yay. And it won't always be y. Sometimes it'll be x. Okay? I think on this assignment it's always y, but I could be wrong about that. To just kind of get us practicing in how to do this, okay, before we get complicated. So we're going to take what y equals and put it in for y. So we've got 4x plus 6, and then instead of the y, we're going to put parentheses and negative 3x minus 3. Always put in parentheses what you're substituting in for that y. Don't forget the equals negative 18. It's amazing how many times you forget the equals and negative 18 and then you start solving and you're like, wait a minute. Okay, and then we need to distribute. So we've got 4x plus 6 times negative 3x is negative 18x. Positive 6 times negative 3 is still 18, but no x this time, equals negative 18. Then you will almost always have something to combine. In this case, 4x minus 18x gives us negative 14x minus 18 equals negative 18. Let me change colors here on us. And then let's add the 18, and we get negative 14x equals 0. And a lot of you are going to go, oh wait, no solution. No, my friends, that is not no solution, okay? You can have a 0 in your equation. Keep going. Pretend it's a real number. Not that 0 isn't a real number, but you don't think it is. Divide by negative 14, and we get that x equals 0. Okay? Now, don't forget, you have to put that back in your equation. Okay? So we're going to take that x equals negative x equals 0 and put it back in. It doesn't matter which one you put it in. You could put it into either one of the equations. It's just easier to put it in the one that's already solved. So that gives us y equals negative 3 times 0, whoops, minus 3. Negative 3 times 0 is 0, minus 3. Y equals negative 3. And our answer is 0, negative 3. Notice all that work, folks. Gotta see it in your assignment. Okay, last but not least, we have this fancy equation where both of our equations are already solved for y. Okay, that actually makes it easier, because now we can just take that y equals and put it in for that y, and we get negative 2x plus 4 equals 3x minus 6. So our math is a little bit easier. So let's add our 2x. We get 4 equals 5x minus 6. Add the 6. Could you have done this in a different order? Of course. 10 equals 5x. Divide by 5, and x equals 2. Okay? But again, remember, we're not done. Okay? We also need to figure out the y. So take that 2, put it back in. You can put it back into either one. I just think the bottom one's going to be easier. Y equals 3 times 2 minus 6. 3 times 2 is 6 minus 6, so y equals 0. So our point is 2, 0. So if you were to graph both of those, like we learned earlier, they should intersect at the point 2, 0. Check your work. See what happens.